Hello. My name is Bonnie Steele. I'm a graduate of St. Catherine's. I'm also a parishioner at St. Bridget's in North Minneapolis. And first of all, I want to say thank you to the Sisters of St. Joseph and to also the St. Catherine's community for hosting Come Together today. It is our honor and it is our privilege to be here with you, and we're grateful. So thank you so much. And thank you to all of you that are here. I have a question for you. How many of you have felt helpless with the violence that seems to be rampant in our community? Anybody? I think that's why you're in this room today, right? Yeah. How many of you have experienced violence? Anyone? How many of you have lost someone to violence? Yeah. And violence, it comes in many forms. Sometimes it comes in our families. Sometimes it comes in the community that we live in. Sometimes it's in the way that we speak to one another and how we are with one another. I have another question for you. How many of you have wondered, what can I do? Anybody? I knew that's why you were here today as well. Me too. The sisters asked me to share a little bit with you about my story and about Come Together. I lived in North Minneapolis, and my mother and my sisters still do. I consider that my home. A number of years ago, and this is just I want to give you one little peek into the experience that we've had as a family. A number of years ago, three of our neighbors, we were neighbors for over 30 years. They were there when my family moved into the community. They were murdered. Grandpa Wayne, his daughter, Renee, and Renee's daughter, Wayne's granddaughter, Cassandra. And it was on a warm September night. I can't forget the phone call from my mom and how that felt. And all of the emotions that, it just is nonsensical. It's crazy making. How did this happen? How could they be gone? Why would someone do this? And this just couldn't happen. They're going to come back. They're going to be there. I'm looking at their yellow house and I know they're going to come home. And they're not. And there's pain and confusion, anger, helplessness, hopelessness, a strong desire for revenge. Violence leaves you with a jumble of unresolved emotions and a sense of loss. You lose your sense of safety. Perhaps you lose the one that you love. You lose the person that you were before whatever it was happened. and you lose that sense of yourself. We get turned upside down and inside out by violence. Now, I have Kleenex here. I want you to know I'm a teary person, so don't worry about me. I'm just going to warn you right up front. And people that know me, and my kids know me, they're all out there, and they know their mom cries like at the drop of a pin. The last drive-by I experienced was when my daughter, Nikki, was home from college here at St. Kate's. And it was a Friday night, and she and my daughter, Ashley, said, you know what, we're going to walk over to Graham's. We're going to go see Grandma. Okay. And I was standing in our dining room, and I was printing a paper for a theology class that I had when they walked out the door. While I was standing there, I heard the whine that was familiar to me of a police car engine, and a car sped by with a man leaning out of the back window with a rifle. And my girls were in this direction, and he started shooting in that direction. And the police were right behind him. I was literally frozen to the floor. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears because my girls were outside. I couldn't even say anything. Fortunately, my girls weren't hit by the gunfire. But I was done, finished. That's it. I called my husband at work, and I told him, I said, we have to move. We have to move, and we have to move now. Because if they killed one of my kids, what would a house mean? Nothing. A little over a month later, we moved. We left our home, the place where we gathered after my dad died, where we spent our holidays, where the children grew up, where my girls learned to play the piano, where my husband and I formed our block club, where we met with our friends and our neighbors. This is the United States. And I kept hearing about the war on terror happening in a faraway land. And I thought, dear God, I'm living the war on terror. 15 minutes from St. Catherine's University. 15 minutes. That's all it was. If there are any nursing majors in here, and my daughter's back there and she's a nurse, you will appreciate this. My blood pressure dropped from an eye-popping 190 over 130. That's what it was before the move, to 110 over 70 a few days after we moved. And I've not had high blood pressure ever since. Fortunately, I was able to move. Or maybe unfortunately, I don't know. Because we left behind people that we loved and that we cared about, and people that were vulnerable, our elders and children and aunts and uncles and friends. There are people that I can't leave. So that's how I come to you. That's who I am, and that's just a little window into what violence looks like and what it feels like. Now, Come Together. Come Together was born out of conversations with Father Paul Jarvis and I. He called me after he had just been installed at St. Bridget's in July a year ago. And 2 toddlers had been killed in drive-by shootings close to the parish. A man had been shot in the face a half block from the parish, waiting for the bus at 10 o'clock in the morning. There'd been a drive-by shooting where bullets came into the school that's across the street from St. Bridget's. And to add even more, to heap on even more, was the tragic killing of Philando Castile. It just added heartache on top of heartache on top of heartache. You know, what I appreciate about Father Paul was, what he had never been in a parish that was in the urban core. And he said to me, I don't know how to respond. Now, St. Bridget's is in my old neighborhood. And the experience that they were having is an experience that I lived. And he asked me to accompany him to Philando Castile's funeral, and I did. And what happened after that were we talked in hurried conversation because we both knew we needed to not only respond, but to be proactive. As we conversed, I challenged Father Paul, and I didn't know how he would respond or if he'd even go for it or even bite. I said, Father Paul, open up your church. Invite the community to come in. Let's offer a place of safety, a place for the community to talk about the pain, the fear, and the trauma that they were experiencing. What we could offer was a place to sing and to pray, and also to listen to one another's stories, just like what we're doing tonight. Father Paul thought about it for about a minute. That's how it felt to me. And accepted the challenge. I thought, wow, he's a brave soul. I suggested also that he invite other faith leaders like Pastor Paul Slack back here from New Creation, and then Pastor Paul's brother-in-law, Pastor Brian Heron from Zion. Faith leaders who were living and sharing this experience as being a pastor in communities that are under challenge and threat. And Pastor Paul was gracious enough to agree to what we weren't quite sure what it would be. It was an organic process, if you will. We talked about what we would bring, as I said, this gathering of conversation, of prayer, of storytelling. And to me, just me, most importantly, was to go out into the community and walk amongst our neighbors, as opposed to being holed up in our building. And to meet our community, meet our neighbors, praying for them, being brave, going door to door, knocking on the door, and saying, how can we serve you today? What do you need from us today? And what we found was the community was welcoming, they were warm, and where we thought we would go and pray for them, they actually prayed for us, prayed with us, and prayed for the larger community in the world that we live in. They prayed for our well-being. When we began, we had Facebook, which we still have, and word of mouth. And we didn't know when we gathered, isn't this the truth, if we'd get 10 people? We didn't know. We didn't know. And 300 people came to that first gathering. And that was incredibly, incredibly helpful. And Come Together has grown to include parishes and congregations from across the Twin Cities, Luther Seminary, and now right here with the CSJs and with St. Catherine's. And it said to us that people are hungry. They're hungry for an opportunity as people of faith to come together and to push back against that sense of hopelessness. Our mission is to bring our faith to bear in a world that is suffering, to live deeply and actively into our call as people of faith or as people of goodwill who do not have a professed faith tradition. And it's to create a sacred container to hold whatever it is that people bring to our gatherings, to hold tenderly their experiences with violence. Some of our attenders have lost children, lost neighbors, lost parents, lost friends. We've had domestic violence survivors. Violence comes in all stripes and in many ways. Coming together affords us an opportunity to acknowledge how we have been bent over in ways not intended for us by all of the fear, the lack of connection to one another, and violence. And that causes us to live in ways that we don't want to live. And knowing we can be better, we can do better, we can live better, to help one another, to stand and come to full stature as the women and men the Creator intended for us. And this we do face to face, one on one. It is to bring reconciliation. It is to bring transformation. It is to bring healing and hope. And that's something that all of our traditions call us to, what our hearts long for, to see our common humanity and dignity through our storytelling and our hearts listening to one another. Come Together is a response to the helplessness and hopelessness we've all experienced and perhaps are experiencing right now. It is an opportunity to co-create with God and with one another so that we can create the kind of world that we all want to live in. And when we come together, I hope that you feel it, because I do. When I look out at your faces, I know that I am not alone. You are here. I am here. We are here. It's an opportunity to live together as sisters and brothers, mothers and fathers, grandmothers and grandfathers, sons, grandsons and granddaughters. We have the opportunity and it's a privilege to create a place called home. Thank you.
We invite you to turn to those near you and share your thoughts on one or both of the following questions. What did you hear in Bonnie's story? A haven from all harm is the right of every living being. What is my part in making this a reality? Again, about 8 to 10 minutes.